We're going to go ahead and get started. I know a few folks are making their way in. Please feel free. And I know some of you will get caught on time around 4:30 or so. Want to be respectful of that, certainly. So we will go ahead and get underway. And if it does turn out that you have to take off, please don't worry about that. I will not be offended at all. And after an hour, we'll all probably be ready to hit the door, I'm gathering. Let me give you an official welcome and my thanks for coming to this first iteration of the 2015 State of the System address. You know, when you're giving a talk that may take place around the start of the school year, or as you're coming into a holiday break, or just at a time where there's a lot of stress on the campus, you might start by saying, well, thanks for showing up at this busy time. I really appreciate it. But it's turned out to be the case now on a university campus. There is no such thing as a not busy time. And I know many of you resonate with that statement. So the fact you've come out to spend a few minutes this afternoon, I much appreciate. I do want to, before I get into some of the discussion today, extend a word of thanks. I'm going to do some introductions too, but I want to kind of separate one out for my special thanks. It's been now, Steve, about a month or so, 6 weeks, that you've taken the helm as Interim Chancellor of SIU Edwardsville. And as we talked about, yeah, we're going to give him a round of applause. That's right. But I do want to extend my gratitude. As Steve and I had talked, and of course some of you have followed that we're close to having an interim chancellor start at SIU Carbondale. You think you're ready for some of these types of positions, but until you get in and just deal with the daily onslaught, it's tough to appreciate. And I know Steve's felt some of that as well in the time he's been in this role. But in terms of his love for this institution and the service he wants to provide to all of us here, you will find none his equal. So, Steve, thank you, and look forward to working with you throughout this year. I am going to go through with some slides, and you'll see that the way I'm handling this is maybe a little bit different than what you're used to for a State of the System address, and that's okay. But I am going to go through about 10 slides or so. And in doing so, again, I want to make sure I leave time for questions. I know a lot of us are concerned about all that we see going on. We're dealing with issues, of course, at the institution as well as system-wide, given the straits we're in at present. And I don't want to give anyone the bum's rush in having time to respond to some queries that you all may have. Before I dive into the slides and go through a few things, though, I do want to spend a few minutes after that special thanks to Steve to make a few introductions. We have at least one of my bosses here. Student trustee Dylan Santoni represents SIU E. Let me get through all of these, then we're going to give him one big round of applause, all right? That'll save maybe 5 seconds. So we've got Dylan Santoni, who's student trustee here for Edwardsville. I did not get a note from trustee Portwood, who typically would be at these things. So Shirley, I'm saying if you're there, throw up a hand. I don't see her. But you know, she is such a supporter of this campus, the faculty, our programs, all that goes on here. I want to thank them. I know that we have a few members of the SIUE Foundation Board, and they'll go like this. Chair Mike Wenzel, I think, is somewhere out there. And Treasurer Lendell Phillips is over here, and we've got I better check my notes. Al Sugatan, we have Al here somewhere. So we've got some of those folks here. Phil Lesson from Congressman Rodney Davis's office, I was going to try to get out, and we've got him over here. And then a lot of the campus leadership for the various senates, constituency groups, I know took time to make sure they were here. Could we all give them a round of thanks for the work that they do on behalf of this school? So the first question is, why put myself and you through this punishment? You know, last year I didn't do a State of the System talk, and there was a little bit of debate about whether that should be the case or not. If you recall, I started as system president on May 1 of 2014, and as I tend to roll, I like to do those State of the University or State of the System addresses more at the start of the academic year, of that fall term. I tend not to like it mid-year, the end of the semester. It just gets too crazy. So having been on the job at that point 3 or 4 months a year ago, I thought it was a little presumptuous to get out there and say too much too soon without taking time to kind of ease up that ramp and join the rest of the SIU traffic that was moving, of course, at a very fast pace, and made the decision just to sit back and take a pass for last year. But I didn't think, given the things we're facing, was appropriate to do this year, and needed to come forward in front of the campuses and share some of my thinking on all that we're dealing with, and felt it was appropriate. At the same time, I didn't do an inauguration speech. Again, we set that aside in coming in for a variety of reasons, but it's time, as we look at what we're facing right now, to get back and have kind of some large-scale, important discussion. You notice I'm not doing this with a script. And that was a little bit of debate, too. You know, typically on something like this, you would have a text and you would read the text. And you know, I'm not that kind of guy. I save that maybe for congressional testimony and very formal occasions, commencement being one, convocation. But I really started working with a script, and as I was going through it, it didn't feel quite right to me, and shifted gears. So I'm kind of handling this a little bit like a TED Talk with PowerPoint. And you notice, well, I will say it is in the form of a TED Talk. It will not be as good as a TED Talk, unfortunately. And I don't know, I've watched a few of those on YouTube. Maybe some of you attended those. I don't know if the TED Talkers have the little teleprompter things to follow their own notes, or whether they just really rehearse well. We don't have a teleprompter, so every once in a while, so I make sure I don't miss a point, you'll see me refer to a note or two. But I thought maybe that would be a better way to kind of deal with some of the things we're going to look at today. I know what a state of the system talk is not, at least for me. Others approach it differently. You're not going to see me put up 50 slides of data, bar graphs, pie charts. It becomes overwhelming. I'm not sure it moves the conversation forward. This type of time together, when we spend it once or twice a year, really needs to be about thinking broadly about what's ahead, dealing with that which is to come. If you want to say setting some vision or trajectory, fine, use whatever term of art you wish. But you're not going to see me, I think I'm true to say, if I remember my slides correctly, not one chart with numbers. I know another thing we're not going to do. You're not going to hear me as we deal with the financial straits we're in this state. You're not going to see me list out a bunch of new initiatives or goals. That's not where we are right now. It's not to say we don't keep doing things, taking on new work, figuring out what it is we need to do to move the system and the university forward. That doesn't stop. But you know, back when I gave my first one of these many years ago now at a different institution, times were different, and you were really kind of setting the stage for maybe 3 or 4 projects or initiatives that were going to be going on, and getting everyone ready for those. That's not where we are right now, are we? Again, new work comes on, old work should go off. But in terms of these big announcements about efforts taking place, that's not this year's address either. There's another thing that I don't use the state of the system or state of the university speeches for, and that is to go back and spend time looking backward at an entire year. Although I will submit to you that SIU Edwardsville has a great deal to be proud of, and I would be remiss if I didn't just take a minute. Steve, I should have just made you come up here and do this, maybe. So even though this isn't about going back and kind of doing a big rehash and patting ourselves on the back for everything accomplished this year, there's been a lot going on at SIU Edwardsville, and it is good to at least take a slide, to take that pause, to mention a couple of things that are worthy of celebration on this campus. Of course, something that takes a lot of oxygen institutionally is getting through that institution-wide accreditation through the Higher Learning Commission. That was announced publicly last March. You have the full 10-year accreditation. I think it'll be in about 4 years. Provost Ansari will have to start worrying about an update. But when we get through that with such flying colors as was the case, certainly worthy of note, something like today. Enrollment continues to be such a strong point for this campus, and I congratulate all of you who make that success possible. It's not just for an enrollment manager or the folks working in admissions. When you see a campus that has such success on enrollment growth, it's really because you have a university-wide, an institutional focus in pledging to be successful to get that work done. This year, the largest enrollment in the history of the institution, second largest freshman class, the largest being a year ago in fall of 2014. And with that, diversity continuing to be strong. Largest number of African American students, largest number of Latino students. Does that not mean we can keep pushing and doing more? Absolutely we can. But the time, the energy, the thoughtfulness that goes in to having the outcomes here are clearly paying off. This is the season of rankings. Ratings, right? We start school. I don't have Rhonda here with me today. And I have to have somebody at the right time. So Karen, you're my person, right? So here would be the three-pronged approach when the time comes. First, you do this, right? And then you do this, and then finally it's zip it. So Karen's my timekeeper. We'll be all right. So as we're looking at this season of rankings and ratings, so much here to be proud of. And you know, you take these to some degree with a grain of salt. Of course, the way presidents and chancellors across the country deal with this is as follows. If you don't do very well in the ratings and rankings, you say, well, they use a different formula. It's not what we focus on. But when you do well, you say, yeah, we accomplished a lot. And certainly you do take these with some measure of careful thinking. But if you look at the gold standard of all these, it is U.S. News and World Report, and we have this year for the public masters or comprehensive universities here in the Midwest, SIU as a top 10 institution. Washington Monthly is another one that now gets a lot of play within that category or that sector. Their list is the top 40 list. SIU is on it. And of course there are other things in regard to the diversity success. Insight in Higher Education had us as a HEED district or a system, I think, for this year as they did their institutional listing. So all of these are things that don't happen by accident. And you can poo-poo them or you can say, well, I don't know what this may mean for sure. But these are independent, third-party agencies looking at what we do based on numbers that are pretty hard to manipulate very much. So to the extent that we see that success, I do think it's worthy of note, and you all should kind of bask in that reflected glory as that success translates throughout the campus. And then through all of this, we keep having new programs coming forward. I'm particularly excited about this integrated studies program that we have taking place. We look for the continuation of integrated programming, shared programming. This is a nice opportunity and reflective of a trend we see nationally in higher education. It may provide an opportunity for some necessary completer programs. I think it was at a last board meeting where we were trying to explain to the board the difference between mechatronics and robotics for a new degree program. So again, the test is, particularly when we get into these difficult times, do we still push forward with a response to the program needs, not just academically, but across the campus that our students and other constituents are calling for. And in this case, that is absolutely what is going on. Make sure I didn't skip something. Let me talk about this. I moved to my brag sheet. This is a little advanced organizer to tell you kind of the three chunks. If you've ever talked to a good priest or minister or rabbi, they will tell you when giving the homily, the sermon, you have kind of 3 points. And those are the 3 points we're going to get into, and I'll have a slide or two on each. But when we look at that narrative arc, it's really just kind of talking about the broad history of SIU, and I'm going to use that to get into a discussion briefly of some of the challenges ahead of us right now. We'll try to operationalize the impact in looking at that story of SIU and what it means for us going forward. And then the last element, that third component to finish the sermon, is to touch upon the values that I think we have to share and know that we do to get us through a very difficult time ahead. So I'm sorry I left that out, but I do want to use that as a means to kind of set the stage for what we're going to be looking at in a moment. It's probably appropriate to mention the national context that's taking place around us. So as we follow the daily news, we hear about the latest from Springfield that's creating a challenge or a problem for us. We can sometimes get caught up in this notion of thinking that the things that we're wrestling with, dealing with, are solely something that is Illinois-centric. And that's not the case at all. The American Association of State Colleges and Universities every year does kind of a top 10 list of the challenges, the issues, those things that public higher education is going to have to deal with and address over the course of the coming years. This could take place in the way we're trying to deal with it now on the campus operationally. Could be something that's reflected in legislation coming out of the various state general assemblies. But I went back to the 2015 top 10 list and kind of pulled out the 5 or 6. I combined them a little bit in the bullets. But I pulled out 5 or 6 of those from the ASCU list. This is a national survey, a national portrait. And if you look at the 5 or 6 things off their list, we're right now being impacted by those same national issues, that conversation that's taking place across the country here in Illinois, and particularly at SIU. Performance-based funding is one of those. Right now in Illinois, we have only 0.5% of our appropriation. 0.5. I guess that is a number, isn't it? But I didn't have a slide on it. 0.5% of our state appropriation is driven by performance funding. As we talk to the legislators, as we hear where they would like to go in the future, what we're hearing is increasing that by 10 times. So minimally, we might be looking at 5% of our appropriation being pushed by performance funding. Now, in some ways, that positions SIU Edwardsville pretty well, but we are in the thick of that discussion now. Obviously, with our lack of funding for MAP grants, the notion of student aid programs, and related to that, student debt is at the fore. On the student debt side, we're in really pretty good shape at SIU generally, and that's certainly the case on this campus, where our student debt levels upon leaving SIU are not too far off the national averages. We're not an outlier by any means. That doesn't mean we want to get, don't want to get better and look at ways we can be more responsive to that national challenge. But to the extent that we get beaten up because of debt levels, I try to push back on that because we really are kind of in the national mix. Student aid programs, though, as you look at how that's getting spoken about in the national conversation, is really pushing very hard on institutions to do more and more support, especially for need-based awards. And we're certainly doing a great deal of that on this campus. So Jeffrey, I won't call you out and ask you to give me the figure. I won't go to Bill Winter, what our total amount in millions of institutional aid is. But we're only going to see pressure for that to grow. Now, we're not talking about the MAP grants here. We're not talking about the state support, the need-based aid for students, which is significant on this campus. Well over 3,000 students, average award in the $2,900 range. It's a big deal. But more and more pressure to look at institutional funding for aid. That's happening in Illinois and not disappearing. Another issue on the big national list, we see it here, not in terms of the free community college, although that's taking place more and more in states around us. Tennessee maybe being the closest one who's moved forward with that. You hear discussions, of course, at the federal level where President Obama has introduced a plan for free community college all across America. That right now has stalled in the Congress, but that doesn't mean it won't come back. And we do have a little grace note on that in Illinois that we're going to continue to have to speak to. And that is the fact that our community college brothers and sisters would love to move into baccalaureate degree granting. And we actually had a bill here in Illinois that was moved forward for our community colleges to start doing baccalaureate degrees. So our Dean of Nursing, Dean Bernay over there, you were kind of early on, Laura, to say, we gotta stop them from meddling a little bit, particularly because they had nursing in their sights. Now, I want to have a strong community college system, but I come down foursquare to say that they should not be about baccalaureate degrees in the state of Illinois. I will not go off onto a tangent as to why that is. We can talk afterwards if you want to hear my take on it. But clearly, as we see this push that's not going away in Illinois, we're going to have to be ready to respond to it, talk about why we think that's not a good idea within our state's environment right now. And of course, finishing out the ASCII list, I think actually if you go to it, numbers 9 and 10 have to do with state appropriations and tuition policy. The things that we're experiencing in Illinois, which I'm going to talk about in a minute in this additional slide, the things that we're dealing with in Illinois with regard to our appropriations, well, it's a little different for us. We don't have any. But the pressure on state appropes that we would see in Illinois, have historically, will continue once our tap gets turned on again, is something that we're sharing with about 40 states across the country right now, and that also is having an impact on tuition policy. We're kind of getting caught in a vice, if you will, and we're going to look at that in just a moment in another slide. So, let me get into the three chunks of the sermon, the elements I want to share with you. This has to do with this narrative arc, the story of SIU. Now I want to be careful about this because when you give this kind of talk, you don't want to get too cosmic. You don't want to get too full of yourself and start making these pronouncements that may be a little ahead of your skis. Because that can get you in trouble. I don't know if we have press in the room. We should have barred them if they're here. No, I'm teasing. Kind of. But as I think about what we're looking at SIU, and again, not unlike universities across the country in the public sector, we're seeing something play out here that for me is kind of a seismic shift. Now, I may be wrong. Maybe I'm all wet, and maybe whenever we come back to talk 10 years from now, if I'm around to hear that talk, this will have not been proven to be the case. But I do think we are coming into a new time, and for us at SIU, a new big era. If I use the term that the tectonic plates are shifting, that probably is a little over the top, a little hyperbolic. But I think we are into a new time, a new area. If you look at the history of SIU, its first period, roughly 75 years, was the establishment of SIU, receiving our Management Act, creating the normal school in Carbondale. And by the way, if you're interested in a story of this, there's an author in Southern Illinois published by SIU Press, and she's done a great book. Betty Mitchell is the author. The book is kind of a coffee table size. Southern Illinois University, a pictorial history. So if you're interested at all in kind of that story that started SIU, that's just a great read. It's not nearly as boring and dry as some of the university histories you read. And that creation of SIU, that starting of the core programs shared by other normal schools, getting the first building started. And obviously this is a Carbondale-centric story, right? Because this is where it took place. That 75-year period up through about World War II was getting SIU created, planted, established with the firm foundation. Clearly, from the post-World War II era, and you can just almost identify this with the start of President Morris's tenure. The eponymous building here in which we meet today. So when Dwight Morris came in as president and started his 22-year run, it just so happened to coincide with the end of World War II and this huge growth in public higher education, certainly with the GI Bill, certainly with the troops coming home, the expansion of families, and we saw that ripple and that boomlet, right? Steve, I could, too, be a history professor. No, others are saying, no, you couldn't. But with that, again, coincident with President Morris's term, we saw this massive expansion of SIU. This is not just in terms of the physical presence, and obviously within that story in 1957, about 10 years after the start of that expansion era, the creation of SIU Edwardsville into what it has become today, a fully formed residential campus within the national prominence of public comprehensive universities. But with that too, the growth of programs, right? You saw the graduate programming, doctoral level education just go great guns, the research enterprise taking off, the creation of the professional schools, the physical plant growth was amazing. We've seen it on all of the campus, and even up through the period of President Pashard. We were getting through that era. If you think about the buildings that came online over that time, engineering here, the Transportation Education Center on the Carbondale campus, Simmons Cancer Institute. I mean, really, all of that did come to a fore, again, not to force the point too much, as we came to the end of President Pashard's term. Well, as they say, if timing is everything, mine sucks. I do think, again, I don't want to push this too far, but I do think, and we're seeing it with other schools, as I've mentioned, we're going into this third big era for SIU, and I had to have a name for it, so I called it the era of retrenchment. Now, maybe I'm wrong, maybe I'm over-reading, but if you look at what fiscal retrenchment entails, oh, by the way, I don't know where our foreign language professors are, this term comes from the French retrenchment, and it can be used either in a military way or a fiscal way, but it's pulling back. It's reduction. I think another term is disambiguation or something like that. Somebody out there, some prof will know. But in essence, if you think of it in financial terms or as a fiscal model, it's restraining, it's pulling back, it's going to lines that are further away. A well-known economist talked about fiscal retrenchment as being the inevitable consequence of governments who have lost control of their finances. And that was written some number of years ago. And as we look at what we're wrestling with in Illinois, I'm thinking that economist may have been correct. So what does all that mean? to figure out what we do about it, I did want to spend a moment just to walk through some of the things we're seeing. And this is somewhat more true for Illinois. The SIU list, the top 10, was a national survey. The things I put on these bullets really are more driven for Illinois. And some of the things I think you're going to see us have to continue to respond to navigate, to figure out how to deal with. Because those issues are in front of us. They didn't just come on the scene in the last year or two. We've been building toward them. But if there was any concern or worry that we were not going to hit a crescendo, a forte, let me disabuse you of that, because I think as we go into this third era, this is where we're going. State disinvestment. Over the past 15 or so years, for those of you who read the system connection, I know some of you just go, delete, it's okay. Say, thank you. I know, we got one reader out there, thank you. Well, I know the Weishauers read last time too, because they had their picture in there. They were the faces of SIU last time. So, if you followed this, you know that this is something that in Illinois, we've seen this now for the last 15 years. About a 30% pull down, really closer to 35% pull down on state disinvestment in public higher education. Now, generally, if you look nationally, this is a trend that's been going on really for about the past 30 to 35 years. Roughly, the rule of thumb we think about is a loss. All the states overall, if you're in North Dakota, you're doing fine because of fracking. But for most of the states, pulling down 1% to 2% a year, and in Illinois it's been a more drastic decline, seeing a lot of that in the last 15 years only. That's not going to change. Now what I'm doing here is not giving you the larger background about how we got to where we are in Illinois. I don't have time for that. And if you need to know the story, if you just moved here as a new hire, go read about where you've just moved to. For those of you who've been here, you know what's happening unless you've been a hermit or living under a rock. So I'm not going to go into what got us to this point and why, and you know that you can find elsewhere. But if there's any question about state disinvestment, it is answered. We're seeing it, and I don't see anything that turns that around for public higher education. Yes, we do hope we get a budget. We do hope there is some appropriation. Is it going to be more? No. And I think that trend is where it is, and not probably going to change for us in Illinois for some considerable time to come, if ever. Cost shifts are another thing that for us are on the horizon. We're going to see more and more talk about this. Right now it's somewhat quiet. Now for those of us who, are paid to follow the developments in Springfield and Chicago and hear what our elected officials are saying and monitor every piece of political intelligence, we've been following this for a while, hearing about it, but it really hasn't broken above the surface quite as much, but that will come eventually. And for us, we're going to potentially be creating or carrying more of the burden, a cost shift for both pensions and group health insurance. Whereas now the state is picking up a large part of that contribution, you're going to see that get pushed to us institutionally, while at the same time this other stuff is going on. It's not that we're going to get an extra appropriation or the state's necessarily going to say, hey, here's another pot of money to deal with this. The cost shift is coming. We're going to have to figure out how to deal with it, while at the same time we see a larger disinvestment on general fund revenue coming to us for overall operations. The school districts and other taxing districts are probably going to get hit with this too in time. Privatization is something that we've had discussed in Illinois. It's coming back for more discussion. Senator Bill Brady. And by the way, let me just take a quick aside here. So when I talk about this stuff, it's not to beat up on any elected official. It's not to point to one party or another and say you're wrong and you're right. This is not what it's about. I will tell you, won't belabor the point, because pretty soon you're going to go like this. But I have great respect for all elected officials. If you spend enough time with them and watch what they put themselves through to get elected, You'd say, first of all, you're nuts. And then you would gain in respect for them too to come into these positions. So it's not about beating up on someone or taking a position that is making a judgment or some qualitative statement. But we're going to see a privatization discussion in Illinois of public higher education. Senator Bill Brady from Bloomington introduced a bill this past session to privatize Illinois' public institutions. It was filed. He eventually pulled it off. He sent us all a very nice letter, by the way. All the presidents and chancellors received a wonderful communication from Senator Brady and said, I'm bringing my bill back in the spring of 16. And I'll look forward to discussion with you about it. Now, what does that mean? We don't know. We don't know how privatization would work. You don't know until you see a bill, but probably it would look something like pushing state grants out to students, and then the students vote with their feet. You know, a large amount of money, not unlike for those of you in the K-12 world we see with vouchers. So that the state voucher would get pushed out to students, and then the student could go anywhere with the voucher. And talk about then enrollment getting important then. So we'll see where the bill goes, and we're going to enter into a conversation with Senator Brady about that, but that's in front of us, and we're hitting the ceiling on tuition. So this is the vice I talked about earlier. This is this kind of double-edged sword. While at one time you're seeing the state appropriations get pulled down, the retrenchment taking place, the reduction, the pulling to the back lines. While that's going on in one end, interestingly, the market-based approaches are not being allowed probably to work either. There's great political pressure, reputational pressure, and other pressures that is creating a ceiling on tuition, where we just can't say, okay, we're going to adjust tuition at a certain level to make up for this, go out into the market and see what we can do. Even if we wanted to do that, and I'm not an advocate for that, by the way, because SIU is about access for students. And I think we have to be very careful about going down that path. Although I do think there's a little more elasticity maybe in our pricing, but that's a classic decision for a board to make. Dylan, you weren't there to sit through it last year, but when we do tuition setting next spring, our board, they take it seriously and they wrestle with it. They're very thoughtful about it, but you get the point. The pressure's there where we just can't say, well, let the market run with it, set a price that kind of takes care of all ills, because we're not going to be allowed to do that either. So what's it all mean? What do we do? I think I'm down to about 5 minutes, Karen. We may make it. I'm going to go through this fairly quickly, and I'm suggesting to you, not in great detail, but, so cut me a little slack. Not in great detail, but just kind of a general sense, approach, understanding of the things that you're going to see us talking about in the days, months, and years ahead, if we are indeed in this third big era of SIU's history, storied history, that being retrenchment. These are some of the things you're going to see. And don't get scared off by them, given what's on the slide. We're going to be thinking more and more about what's a revenue center versus what's a cost center. And again, this is where people on the academic side of the house can get really nervous, and I don't want that to be the case. But we are going to have to look at return on investment for certain programs. Now, does that mean we're going to quit teaching philosophy or something? No, not at all. As Steve and I stopped at the philosopher's table today, and sure enough, in 20 seconds, the two faculty members got into a debate, didn't they? Only in philosophy. But we are going to have to look programmatically at those things that provide revenue, those that have costs that we can't recover. Does that mean we quit doing things? No, that's not what I'm saying. But we've got to figure out, how do we mitigate that? What do we do in terms of the courses we offer, when we offer them, what we do in the summer, what we take online? That is going to get much more granular as we go forward. Yes, even looking at academic programs. It's not to say we're getting out of business of anything, but the the kind of disaggregation of data on cost we do have to take a look at. And I'll beat up on Carbondale while I'm here, as I'm in my last 2 weeks as acting chancellor. We have an academic program, a major, on the Carbondale campus that has 8 majors and 3 full-time, full professors. I think it's going to be difficult for that program to stand going forward. I'm not saying we're cutting it. I'm saying there's got to be a conversation about it, but I'm using it to illustrate the fact that discussions that we usually kind of hold in abeyance, we're probably not going to hold those in abeyance anymore. Neither are we going to say, just come in and start kind of whacking away with blunt instruments. That's not the way to do this either. A thoughtful approach. Cost reduction and alternative revenue will be part of this discussion too. Cost reduction in general. What can we do in more efficient ways? How can we get savings, streamlining? We'll hit that on the last bullet. That kind of even moves more to the fore than what it has in the past. We're going to be looking, and we're doing this now. It's not to suggest that this isn't happening at all, but this nimbleness in programs and operations is going to be necessary. We're going to have to be willing to kind of move a little more quickly, pivot a little more briskly at times as we're dealing with situations in front of us. It's not to say we're trying to push along decision-making too quickly, that we don't want dialogue, that we don't want kind of the shared governance that marks higher education not to take place. No. But to the extent that we have the luxury sometimes of taking 2 years to debate about fairly narrow problems, I think you're going to see increased press to try to respond to those in a somewhat more rapid fashion, or at least a little quicker fashion. You know about the next 2 bullets. We're doing it well. Enrollment growth is going to be more and more critical to the success of all of the campuses. If we can't look at state appropriations, philanthropy, obviously, we're going to keep doing what we're doing, but it can't pay for the operations of the university. Philanthropy gives us the premium of excellence, but it doesn't cover basic operations. You can get efficiencies, but that only gets you so far. But to Edwardsville's benefit, the enrollment success, the track record that's been built, is going to provide, I know, Bill, it's not enough for you. We need more and more. But that enrollment growth provides a cushion on local income that's going to give breathing room to SIU Edwardsville, and we don't want to do anything to disrupt that or change it. And on the other campuses, they're going to have to ramp up efforts even more so. Shared services, this is something you've heard me allude to, and we're going to dive into this pretty heavily. At the system level, we already do some things presently in terms of a systems approach or a shared services approach. The 2 that come to mind out of the gate would be legal services, internal audit services. We're going to push more and more to think about things we can do from a system level to get efficiency, to get streamlining, to not be repeating things 3 times over. But that is not to take away at all the ability of each of the campuses to kind of set their own trajectory for where they want to go, how they want to do that, the work that they take on to build the campus for the future. But if there are things that we can get done more efficiently in a shared services approach, we're going to keep studying that over time. That is not to be able to take away your money and give it to SIU. It is rather to figure out a way to do things more efficiently and then plow those savings back into the campuses. And by the way, this is not about academic programs. If there turns out to be discussion between, for instance, Edwardsville and Carbondale, such as we have with our wonderful nursing arrangement, great. And we'll brag about that and tout its success. But this is not about saying we're trying to combine campuses or academic programs or things of that nature. This is really looking at the operational side of the campuses and figure out, can we quit doing some things in triplicate? Some we can't. And we'll have to keep doing it the way we do it. In some areas, I guarantee you there are savings to be had. Before you get too weirded out about this, let me tell you that this is what we see happening all over organizations. Whether you're talking the business corporate community, I know that causes you to shudder. It shouldn't. Because it's happening in front of our eyes in airlines, and in healthcare, in insurance. It is how companies in the private sector are kind of wringing out everything they can, like we're having to. So it's appropriate that we look at it, but not to change the academic profile or the face of any of our institutions. Karen's going to give me the word in a second because we want to get to some questions. I know that this campus is working very hard, and I'm not going to give you a few words in the interest of time, but I know this campus is working hard and will continue to do so in dealing with what is to come on the financial management side. So set aside what may happen in shared services or efficiency savings we can get over the next 3 to 5 to 10 years. Don't worry about that yet. The campus leadership is taking very seriously figuring out what needs to happen in the short term, what we do for the immediate future if in fact we're sitting here 3 months from now with no state appropriation. And you're going to hear Chancellor Hansen and his team over the course of the next few weeks talk about some of that. Not to rattle change or to scare people, but to say we have to plan for the worst case scenario. Conversations are going on right now with UPBC about what that may look like and how it may work. There'll be continuing conversations with the constituency bodies because you've got to kind of plan for the worst, but work every lever you have for the best. And that's happening here with good leadership from the campus. Again, get ready for questions because we're about done. But what I would close with you is this, and you can see a few of those here. You know, we talk about values of an institution, and this is going beyond what you might see on a strategic plan for an institution or the system. We're trying to get that work. We haven't had a system strategic plan in well over a dozen years, so once I get back to one job, the board wants to start looking at that again, and we will. But if you look at organizations generally, if you set aside the values that good institutions share, shared governance, mutual respect, diversity, all of those types of things you see in a strategic plan, organizations can be talked about as either having loose coupling or tight coupling. And my belief is this, and particularly true for SIU. We need to be loosely coupled as a system on how our work gets done, on what's achieved, the direction our campuses want to take. You don't want dictated to SIU Edwardsville that trajectory, that story for this institution. That has to come from all of you on this campus, and it shouldn't be micromanaged by me or a board or a state legislature or anyone else. So in terms of that direction setting, the operations that get you there, the decisions concomitant to that, etc., that's loose coupling in the sense that the campus figures that out. And you need to be given your lead to go where as an institution you desire to go. And I can tell you it's going to be some great places if you look at the trajectory of SIUE. Where we have to be tightly coupled as a system is on the values we share. Again, not the strategic plan values that mark, kind of good relationships with one another, but some of the values about ensuring that we remember the region we're in and the service to it. I don't know of too many state university systems across the country that are more intricately tied to their regions than SIU. That's true for Carbondale and it's true for Edwardsville. If we lose that, give it up, take attention away from it, we're lost. Our biggest strength are the people who have great fondness and affinity. They know the transformational value of the SIU institutions, and we've got to keep them with us to be able to move forward. The commitment to our cause, what we do, we shouldn't lose sight of. We get a lot of folks who want us to be kind of community colleges on steroids. That's not what we are. We're not about doing job training. Well, in a way we are. But the success we've had here is a recipe for future success, not trying to reinvent ourselves or getting away from our core as we go into difficult times. Enough said about resiliency and responsiveness. As we look at a privatization bill, we've got to figure out what to do with that, how to deal with it. Creativity in our approach, more entrepreneurship. Don't wait for somebody to help figure out where we go from here. Suggest those things yourselves to help define, mold, and direct the institution. You see my heading for that. When I'm in meetings a lot of times, when you got to get serious and have one of those discussions, I'll say, all right, we need to talk among family. And what I hope we were able to do a little bit is have time together among family to get a good sense of what's ahead of us. That as long as we keep ourselves tightly coupled, firmly planted, cemented to those things that have brought us success, that have put us in that national conversation here at SIUE, as long as we, yes, think smarter, do things in different ways, be more efficient, of course. But as long as we tie ourselves to what has brought us to the success today, we'll be fine for the future. And that is due to the work, the dedication, the commitment that all of you share here at SIU Edwardsville. All right. Thank you. The TED Talk, they only let TED Talks go how long? 15 minutes? Well, hell, I blew that, didn't I? Okay, we're going to take some time for questions. There are microphones out here. Try to listen so we don't, ask the same thing too many times. I'll try to be quick in response. I know some of you got to catch buses and other transportation. We understand. Grab a cookie on the way out. There are refreshments. But the floor is open. Get up here. State it loud and clear, and I'll do my best to make something up. I was told there would be a deluge. Okay, well, somebody's thinking, are you going to ask about group health insurance?
I am not.
Then ask your question.
My name is Lori. I work in the Department of History. And I have always said that I work at Southern Illinois, Edwardsville, for a false sense of security. And I feel like that security is being taken away.
I know. I know, and all I can say to you is don't let them get to you. Because, and it kind of goes to my last slide, right? It goes to my last slide. Not this one, the one before. As long as we stay on those values that we share, we'll be okay. So if I had more time and, Karen wasn't going like this, I would have said, SIU is not going to disappear. We're not going to wither away, particularly this campus, I might add. We're going to continue to be strong. The growth is going to allow a great deal of latitude to get things done. But I love you for the sincerity. And how many times I get that across all of the campus sites. There is an affinity that exists among so many of us here about this institution. And it's also, by the way, shared by our students and our alumni and our donors and so many others. And all I can say is I love you for showing it. And don't worry, because while we may remold some ways, while we may shed one skin and take on another, while you're over this era of retrenchment, it may be a reshaping, it's still going to be SIU. It's still going to be SIU. So we go in strong, we do what we do for our students. I don't see that going anywhere. I really don't. And in some ways, SIU Edwardsville's positioned, if you look at the institutions across the country like SIUE, probably positioned about as well as any to keep having that success and moving forward. So it doesn't mean we're mindful about it. It doesn't mean we don't watch the decisions we make, how we spend our money, what we take on, what we shut off. But we're going to be all right. We're going to be fine. Let me talk about group health insurance before we get another question if we have one. Steve and the senior leadership of the campus is working hard to ensure that we can do what we can. There's just not a lot of levers to pull on this. This is just getting I sound like Governor Rauner. It's getting caught up in the fight. It's getting caught up to some degree in this impasse, this stalemate. And I think the trick for us, and when I say us, I mean all of SIU, the 7,000 plus employees, the trick is going to be to work as much as we can with the providers to get them to be willing to continue the extension of care, knowing that eventually they are going to get reimbursed, they are going to get paid. You know, if you're a healthcare provider in Illinois, you're used to going for a long time without getting reimbursement anyway.
31 weeks.
31 weeks for who you see for care or where you go. And that's the same story. So and Steve, I know you're communicating on this or will going forward. But if we get in a difficult strait with providers, we are going to do our best to reach out. I know the legislators have been contacted. They get it too. Everybody gets it. And we think where we might have the biggest ability to kind of push is going to be with the providers. So if you are running into a situation where you've got a provider that's saying, well, to do this procedure, we got to have the money up front, please let Steve's office know that. Please let Sherry and HR know that, because we are trying to communicate that. We're trying to talk to the providers about, the fact that we still have people who need care. And I can't give you some promise that says, hey, it's all taken care of in one fell swoop, but I think you've got some pretty good minds statewide who are trying to figure out where are the points to insert to try to get this addressed somehow. And we continue to monitor and work on it as hard as we can. It's a mess. But right now, it appears that the providers are working with us for the most part. And if there's anything I would say to you, again, not to beat this horse, it is keep us informed of what you're getting from your providers on both sides of the river, please. And that'll be the best thing we can do to kind of keep pushing the message and letting the tale be told. All right, what else? So as I suggested, if we had gone to a cash bar instead of whatever's back there, we might have been able to pay for something this year, Steve. But alas, speaking of alternative revenue sources, but alas, we haven't. I hope some of you are able to stop by. I'm going to be around for a little while. I've got to get back to campus in Carbondale eventually. But to the extent you're able to hang around, have a bit of fellowship with people you don't get to see maybe more than a couple of times a year at events like this, please stay, sharing some of the refreshments, and understand. It's a strong institution. It's not going to quit being a strong institution while we figure out how to get through these turbulent waters. We're going to do it. It's going to change, in some ways, what we do, how we do. But the transformative power of this place, it's not going away. We're still in business and will be. Thanks so much for coming out. Have a great rest of the year. Go Cougars. Thank you.